Amen. Thank you. Be seated. This is one of my favorite Sundays of the year. I've seen some of those pictures for, I think, 8 years now, and I still love seeing them. It never gets old. And then when we add some new ones every year, I just love this Sunday because I love military folks, love their families for all the sacrifice they make. And that's one reason I'm gonna finish our series about churches, and more churches next week, because I don't want to miss an opportunity to tie in with something so important as our military. And it's amazing. I was looking at this week, and I discovered only one person in the New Testament is said to have amazed Jesus in a positive way. Now, he was amazed in a negative way by the unbelief of the Jews. It said he was amazed in a negative way that the Jews didn't believe. But there's only one person recorded in the New Testament who amazed Jesus in a positive way. And it just happens that he was a soldier. And I think we can learn something from him. You saw up here the strong military connection that our church has. You saw veterans of all ages from all branches of service. You saw that some of us are what I would call old soldiers because we don't look like we did then. And our uniforms are different than the uniforms now. So that's one way you can tell an old soldier by the pictures of their uniform. Personally, I have a reminder who lives at home with me that I'm getting old. When you're married to somebody 17 years younger, and her name is Joyce, she revels. She revels in every opportunity to remind me that I'm getting old. I went home one day this week, and she was laughing hysterically by herself when I got there. And when I got her calmed down, she said, "You just got to hear about this phone call I got today." She said, "I got to tell you." She said, "Life Alert called today." This is a true story. She said, "Life Alert," you know that little thing that old people wear? You know, you fall, I've fallen, I can't get up. You press the button and somebody comes and helps you. She said, "They called today." And she said, I said, "Well, did you talk to them?" She said, "Yeah. Is this really nice lady trying to sell us one of those Life Alert things." And as I was talking to her, I was trying to figure out why did she call here. And then it dawned on me, you'll be 60 soon, so that's why she called. She said, "I almost bought one." So I don't need any reminder that I'm an old soldier. But let me tell you, one of the surest ways to identify an old soldier is that we tell old stories. Okay? Am I right, old guys? We tell old stories. And you know what? Sometimes we tell them over and over again. We just tell the same one over and over again. You know, sometimes that's because that story has special meaning to us. Sometimes it's because we're old, we forget we told it to you. You can decide which it is today, but since I'm told that I'm old, I'm going to act old today, and I'm going to tell an old story again. And I may tell it every Veterans Day as long as I'm here, either because I forget I told it or because it means something to me. For me, it captures the essence of our military that we sang about in that song, that more than self, they have interests beyond self. They love our country. You know what? Military people love the people they serve with. And they'll make incredible sacrifices for people they serve with. You go back to a night in February of 1991. I was a whole lot younger then, and I was a young chaplain in a battalion in Iraq we had a mixture of infantry and tanks in a battalion-sized task force. And one night, one of our infantry vehicles got shot by an Iraqi tank. And there were 5 crew members on that vehicle, and 2 of them were killed almost instantly, and the other 3, all 3 were wounded seriously. One of the seriously wounded was just a kid. at least to me. He's 19 years old. He was a private. If you don't know what that means he's at the bottom of the Army food chain, okay? The only place he can look is up. And he was a young 19-year-old private. But you know what? I mean, new to the Army. He'd been trained. He was qualified to be out there. But you know what this kid did? He didn't hide to try to save his own life. He didn't try to get away to save his own life. You know what that kid did all by himself? He managed, in spite of his wounds, to get the machine gun out of this disabled vehicle and get it set up, and he laid down covering fire because by that time dismounted Iraqi infantry soldiers were running towards him. So he keeps them away with a machine gun. Somehow he also managed to get the portable radio out and call for help in the middle of all of this. And if that's not enough, he gets one of those flare canisters. Some of you military folks seen those? Do you know those aren't easy to open, are they? He opened it with his teeth. And I'll tell you in a minute why he couldn't open it any other way. Opened it with his teeth. In the process, broke all of his front teeth out. And he shot that flare up in the air and to identify the exact location. And one of our tanks saw that flare and was able to rush over there and keep those 3 who were wounded alive. 19-year-old kid did that. I happened to be with some medics that night near where this happened. And so they started working on this kid. And he had some severe injuries to his abdomen and groin. And it was dark, and I knelt with that kid's head kind of between my knees in the sand. He was laid out on a poncho on the sand. And I held his right hand in my hand. I prayed with him. I prayed for him. I tried to comfort him. And my flashlight, for a little bit, was the only one available. And so I shined it down there for the medics to work while I held his hand and talked to him. And the whole time I was holding his hand, I thought, something's not right here. Something is different. Something feels odd. But it was dark, and my priority was not to see that. It was to hold the light for the medics to work on him. Finally, somebody brought a better light, and they didn't need my little flashlight anymore. And I was able to turn my flashlight down to my hand holding his hand. And then I realized why it felt different. Because I was holding the bleeding, bloody stubs of and bony stubs of his thumb and a finger or 2 on his right hand. So he opens the flare canister with his teeth. You know, the incredible thing is, that kid whose head is looking up at me between my legs, he sees my flashlight go down to his hand, and he looks over at it, and he looks up at me, and he says, "Chaplain, don't worry about it. I'm left-handed." I swear, true story. And he never once asked about his wounds. But you know who he asked about? How are my buddies? How are the guys who were on the track with me? He put them above himself. And I was amazed. The reason I still tell that story is that it still amazes me today what that kid did that night. And that's why I selected a soldier in the Bible who amazed Jesus, because it's just been on my mind. It comes around to my mind every year at this time. And so I thought, well, great story about an amazing young kid in Iraq, but let's read about a soldier who did something more amazing. He amazed the Lord Jesus Christ. Luke chapter 7, verse 1. Open a Bible there. We have them all around the room if you didn't bring one. If you're using our Bible, they're under a chair in front of you, and you can turn to page 730 and find Luke chapter 7 and find verse 1. And let's read about the only person in the Bible who amazed Jesus in a good way. And he was a soldier. Luke 7, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. And there a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard about Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." And so Jesus went with them. And he was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to him, saying, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. That's why I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes, and I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." And then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. He was healed. Only twice does it say Jesus was amazed. Once was negative, and once by this Roman soldier, a centurion, meaning he was a man in charge. He had a command of one of the basic fighting units of the Roman army, the most feared army in the world. And when he told people to do something, they asked, "Well, how high you want me to jump?" He was in charge, but he amazed Jesus, not because of the power he had in the military. He didn't amaze Jesus because of his rank. He didn't amaze Jesus because he had such great authority over soldiers. He amazed Jesus for some other reasons. Two of them, I think, are he amazed Jesus because he had compassion and he had humility. Now, Roman military leaders were not known for their compassion and their humility. And yet this guy displayed both. He showed compassion by building the Jews in Capernaum a synagogue. Now, if you do a little bit of study on the relationship between the Roman military and the Jews, you'll understand what an incredibly kind, compassionate act that was. Most Roman military leaders wouldn't do anything for a Jew, much less build them a place to worship. And he also was unique in his compassion for his servant, a slave, property. I mean, most Roman military leaders back then, hey, this one's sick, get him out of here, get me another one. But this guy said, I care about this man. And I've heard about somebody who has control over life and death. He showed compassion. He showed humility. You know, he didn't parade in as a Roman centurion and demand that Jesus do this or that. In fact, he was so humble, he said, "Lord, I don't even deserve you to come in my house. I am not even worthy enough to speak to you. But I know you can do what you say you can do. And I know that you have control over life and death. I know you can heal my servant and you don't even have to be here." He was a humble man. But now, you also need to know that you couldn't be a Roman centurion then if you weren't also tough as nails. If you weren't hardcore, if you weren't a powerful, strong, tough, physically and tough-minded leader of men, you weren't going to be a centurion. So what does this show us? Well, it shows us that there's no inherent contradiction between being a person in authority and a leader of men, a leader of soldiers, a leader of men and women, tough-minded, tough physically. There's no inherent contradiction between that and being humble and being compassionate. Being a soldier in God's army doesn't mean that you're weak and spineless. That guy was not weak and spineless, but he was compassionate and humble. And guys, let me speak to just you for a moment, because I think you're the biggest ones, because I've been there, who have a problem with, if I become a Christian, really get committed to Christ, I'm going to have to sit around with my hands folded a lot, and I'm going to have to kind of become a jellyfish for a spine, and people are going to be able to just run all over me, and I can't be the strong leader that I want to be. Yes, you can. God is looking for men who will be strong leaders at home and at school and at work and at church. He's looking for men like that. And you can stand up and you can be counted. And you can still be the unique combination of humility and compassion that guy was. But you know what? You got to humble yourself. You can't march into the presence of Jesus and demand anything. If you're going to get to know him, you're going to have to humble yourself, and you're going to have to kind of have the attitude that centurion had and say, Lord, I know I don't deserve you. I know I am not worthy of you. But I know you can do what you say you'll do. And he has said he will forgive you and write your name in heaven's book. Guys, get over yourself if you think that Christianity is only for women and boys and girls and sissies. And that's what's kept some of you men in this room from trusting Jesus Christ so far. Because you're worried about your image as a man. You're worried about what somebody in your military unit will say. Here's a guy who didn't care what they said, because he was committed to doing what was right, and he was humble enough and compassionate enough to do it. But let me tell you, here's what I think really amazed Jesus. Is this guy respected him as Lord and had faith. I think that's really what amazed Jesus. In fact, that's what Jesus said. I have never seen this much faith, even amongst all the Jews who should know who I am and should have faith and should respect me as the Son of God. I've never seen it in them, but I see it in this guy. What he was saying is that this powerful, authoritative leader of men also recognized greater power and greater authority when he saw it, and he saw it in Jesus. He said, Lord, I have such respect for who you are and such faith that you are in charge of life and death, that you don't even have to come to my house to heal my servant. You just say it and it'll be done, because you are a man in authority above me. Do you really respect who Jesus is? That means you really believe that he is who he says he is? Really believe he died on the cross for you? Or did he just do that for boys and girls? You really believe he rose from the dead? And that gives him power to forgive you? To write your name in heaven's book? See, I don't know everything that Roman soldier believed about Jesus. But he believed enough that he's the only person in the New Testament who ever amazed Jesus. It's not really explained very well what it means to have respect and faith in Jesus in those verses. But I think the Apostle Paul explained it pretty well in Romans when he said, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. I think that pretty much captures it. You've got to respect, believe who he says he is, that he's Lord, that his death counted for your sins, that his resurrection empowers him to forgive you, that's save you from punishment for your sins. And you've got to ask him for it. You've got to confess him with your mouth. You don't sit around church and finally absorb enough of Jesus to be saved. You don't study about Him until enough of it creeps in and you're saved. You don't meditate on Him enough until you're saved. It is a conscious decision when you confess Him with your mouth and believe in your heart. When you have the respect for who He is and what He did, and you ask Him for it. And you see, here's for some people. I mean, I want to believe, but I really don't want to go public with that, preacher. I mean, what are people going to think? Well, I think confess it with your mouth means to be open about it. I think the Bible really teaches that if you've truly trusted Jesus, you won't be ashamed. That you'll have enough courage and enough commitment, like a Roman soldier did 2,000 years ago, to stand up and say it and be counted. And I know that's where some of you in this room are. Not because I'm really smart, but just because I know people. I've known hundreds of people who really believe, but they just have trouble, telling somebody. They have trouble walking down here at the end of a service and saying, Pastor, I confess that I believe in Jesus and I want the church to know. Pastor, I confess I believe in Jesus and I've never been baptized to show it. And, I want to do that. I know there are people in this room who fit that. You trusted Jesus somewhere before today, but you've never confessed it with your mouth to the church. I know some in this room who've never really trusted Him. I don't know who you are, but I know that in this room with this many people, there's bound to be some. Can I tell you the only thing keeping you from trusting Jesus today is you? Whatever excuse you come up with for today for not doing it, whatever excuse you've used in the past, whether it's pride, whether it's whatever it is, those are all just cover stories for the fact that you don't want to. Those are all just smoke screens for the truth that you don't want to. The only thing that can keep you from trusting Jesus right now in this room is you. That's it. Because you can bow quietly in your heart right now and say, God, I get it now. I understand who Jesus is, that it was my sin that put Him on the cross, that He rose from the dead and He has the power, and now I have to turn from everything I've been and ask Him for it. You can do that right where you sit.